Klipstine in this review because he's going to come up a lot in this review. We are talking about the movie The Harbinger, which is also known as The Curse of Rosalie. And this is a kind of sprawling, ambitious, supernatural mystery horror film that stars Will Klipstine, is directed by Will Klipstine, co-written by Will Klipstine, and produced by Will Klipstine. So very much his baby, and he's created a very ambitious movie that is one of these rare occasions where I will say it actually would be of benefit to have some type of spoilers before you watch this. Now, I'm not going to go into spoilers, I want it to be your choice. But nonetheless, I'll explain why I say that. The basic premise is this. We have a young family, a father, a mother, and their kind of young daughter move to this kind of new town for a new start because the father has got a job there. Now, this is a family with a secret. There is something wrong with the daughter, and it may well be of a supernatural origin, and the cause of that may be a deal that maybe the father has made previously to this. So they've come to this town hoping for a new start and hoping for a way to rid themselves of this curse. And when they get this town, there seems to be everyone seems to be a little bit weird, to be honest with you. And there also seems to be, there are odds with the kind of the local Native American kind of tribes in their land, which kind of borders this particular town. And as the movie progresses, there seems to be a rash of kind of suicides from people who normally wouldn't commit suicide, and it may well be linked to this supernatural being the Harbinger, but there may well be other supernatural elements at work here as well. What will happen, you'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. Now, before we go into the actual what I think works and what doesn't work, I am going to keep this spoiler free, but I will say I'll explain what a Harbinger is in this instance for this particular movie at least, because I feel, although that's not a spoiler, I think it would help somewhat in regards to watching this movie. So the Harbingers in this movie are essentially a minion of the devil, a human that has been tasked with completing some work for the devil, and this normally means convincing people to commit suicide so the devil gets their souls. And they do this by using this kind of magical artifact which kind of persuades them, essentially. And that's essentially what a Harbinger is. And although that's not really a spoiler, because it's just what they are, I think that at least will give you some help in regards to understanding this movie. And I'll explain why I say that in a moment. But let's talk about what I think does work in this film. As I've mentioned, this film is very ambitious. It's a lower budget movie, but nonetheless it has bags of ambition. It's very much a character-driven movie over kind of spectacle, although it does have some impressive kind of sequences, I would say, that do involve kind of more elaborate sets and kind of VFX. But for the most part, you know, we follow our main character, played by the writer, director, producer, and he's kind of essentially our point of view character here. This guy who looking for answers, looking for a way to kind of help his daughter. And the movie is one of these films that likes to play its cards close to its chest. It doesn't want to tell you completely what's going on and wants to kind of reveal things as the film progresses. Now, this has positive and negative effects. The positives are that as the film progresses, we learn more and more about it, and obviously we understand what's actually kind of going on as the film progresses, because it kind of like, you know, it filters in these kind of various different reveals as the film goes on, and I'll maybe touch on what doesn't work in a minute. But it does give the film these kind of like these moments where stuff is revealed, and you're thinking, oh, now I understand the kind of the reasons and stuff like this. So it does have these moments within the movie where certain things are kind of revealed, and there's what WTF moments you might want to say. So in regards to that, so the plot-wise, as I say, it's very ambitious. It's got a lot going on, lots of different kind of supernatural elements involved. It tries to kind of defy your expectations somewhat by making you think it's going to be like the creepy kid, kind of like Damien sort of style kind of movie, when it really isn't. So it veers off in so many kind of different directions in regards to what it's kind of trying to cover. But there's a lot of lore here. I mean, you can't say this movie doesn't try and world build, because there's so much kind of, it's so densely packed here. We're going to come back to that. But yeah, there's lots kind of going on, lots of kind of like different kind of supernatural elements that are involved. And as I'm going to mention too, there are some pretty effective sequences here. There's a sequence within a crypt which has this kind of door, kind of like these stairs that kind of appear that go down to hell, which kind of just kind of come out the ground, which I thought was excellent. There's some kind of pretty good kind of makeup effects in regards to this kind of demonic kind of character that we'll kind of see. And, you know, there's some kind of fun little, just kind of moments here and there that I think really work. There's a sequence where we see a kind of character kind of like glide across this kind of like graveyard, for example, and it's, you know, it kind of looks like a little bit like Nosferatu and things like this. And so there are some kind of effective moments that I do feel are well kind of put together. And I have to say, I do feel you got a good sense of the characters here. It's a long film. Again, this is going to be a part I'm going to come back to, but it does mean that we spend quite a bit of time with our characters, so we kind of get to know them. And the movie does try and give you a, you know, it doesn't dump everything at once. It kind of does kind of feather stuff in, as I say. It gives you learn more about the characters and more about their kind of their motivations and their morality as the film sort of progresses. I think the little girl, who is not in it as much as you think, she's kind of like the catalyst for what's going on, but she's not really the main driving force of the film in regards to screen time and stuff. But she does a creepy job here of this sort of clearly kind of affected with something kid that seems to creep everyone else out and do some somewhat kind of disturbing things. So let's talk about what I think doesn't work, and I might circle back to maybe some positives in just a little bit. So this movie has a number of I think issues with it. One of them, I think the movie's too long. I've seen other reviews that mention this, and I do agree. It's nearly 2 hours long, and the thing is, this movie has got a lot packed in. So I think just cuts may not work here, but I think maybe the script could have been rewritten here to make this more of a streamlined film, because there's so much kind of going on. I didn't think it needed quite as many sort of elements that are introduced in this movie. And, you know, if you cut one bit out necessarily, it might affect because of the flow of the story. So I actually think there's elements here that I think could have been rewritten to make it a much more of a streamlined film. And therein lies, I think, the biggest problem. This movie is kind of hard to follow. I've seen this a number of times with independently produced movies, especially where you have a singular driving force. We have this, our main guy, he's an actor, he's our main actor, he's our director, he's our co-writer, he's our producer. He knows exactly the story that he wants to tell. And I'm assuming his team of kind of other producers and actors, they in their mind, they kind of have a clear, you know, end goal of the story that they're trying to tell. However, and I've said this, as I say, a number of times when it comes to these kind of low budget movies, when you are looking at this cold, for someone who has nothing to do with the production of the movie, you're watching this and thinking, I'm kind of lost. This doesn't make sense to me. And again, I've said this a number of times. I used to have a job in marketing, and part of my job was making sure marketing was understood by people outside of the industry, so to speak. So I used to test kind of marketing concepts on people that had absolutely nothing to do with what I was kind of working on, to see if it would work. And this is why films have test audiences, but I feel the lower budget movies don't really bother with that kind of thing because they're obviously on a budget. But the rub is that these films sometimes become a weight around their own neck. And I feel the ambition of this movie and its convoluted kind of plot really don't help it. So let me just give you some examples. Again, I'm not going to go into spoilers here, but the movie starts with this couple already having to deal with kind of like this daughter having some type of supernatural influence. But the movie doesn't tell us what it is. I mean, we don't even know for sure that that's kind of what's happened initially. You're just kind of picking up the kind of the vibe as the film progresses. Now, the movie wants to have these reveals later on. This is why it doesn't kind of do it. But unfortunately, straight off the bat, you're kind of thinking, what's kind of going on? Do they know that there's something wrong with their daughter? Why kind of, if that's the case, because you assume it's going to be like a possession or something, you know, why are they kind of letting their daughter go and play with other kids, etc.? Or do they think it's some type of medical issue? You know, all of this kind of, it just happened. We just hit the ground running. And because of this, it kind of, you know, you kind of like, I don't really follow what's going on. Now, things are revealed through a lot of exposition and some flashbacks through the movie because they want to have those reveals kind of later on. But the downside is that you are kind of going into this cold without really kind of knowing what you're watching. And although those reveals will come, it might put people off while they're watching, thinking, I don't really understand what's kind of going on. And that's the danger when you kind of do this kind of style of kind of filmmaking. You kind of can lose your audience pretty early on. But it doesn't stop there, because this movie is filled with these kind of reveals and different elements that are kind of introduced, different kind of artifacts, different kind of factions, different kind of like, even the kind of the land, for example, and borders within the land and stuff have a big impact on the actual kind of story. And there is so much kind of information, and you're not, you know, you have these exposition dumps every kind of so often with the character literally telling you about kind of, oh, this is because of this, that, and the other. But there's about three massive exposition dumps within this movie, or we get a bunch of flashbacks as well. Had this kind of been told in a linear way, you might not have had the reveals because you would have done it in a kind of, you know, in kind of linear order. But I think it would have been an easier viewing experience. So that's the rub, I think. If you want to have these reveals, that's all well and good, but you've got to make sure your audience is sticking around to kind of watch them. Because this movie, I think, introduces way too many elements. As I say, it has this kind of long running time. There's, again, there's various different things that are kind of introduced I didn't think needed to be there. It's just overstuffed. The ambition far outweighs the what's on screen. Now, this is ideally what a producer should do, is be able to kind of say to the director, look, I appreciate your kind of your artistic vision, but we've got to think about, you know, returns, and we've got to think about our consumers going to be able to, you know, understand what's kind of going on. And when you have the director as the producer, also the star and the writer, yeah, you can see the problem. There are other producers, but he's the kind of the main producer. So it's a confusing movie, and even when it's all watched, a lot of stuff is kind of revealed, but you're still not 100% sure about kind of certain things because there's so much that kind of goes on. I mean, you can't say this movie is boring, because it certainly isn't boring, but it's just confusing. So I don't know what's worse in a way. Certainly not boring, or at least I didn't think so. I think some of the acting is a little bit on the weaker side. I think for the most part the acting is okay. The little girl's pretty good. I think the dad, you know, our writer-director, does a pretty good job here. But there are other kind of characters who I don't think did particularly well. There's also a really obvious kind of like character who is, you know, our secret kind of bad guy, so to speak. Thinking, how obvious is this, and how stupid is our main character, you know, within this movie? And it's like, as you know, it's revealed that there's multiple kind of, you know, multiple entities at work here, and you think it's got to be someone that we're introduced to. Who could that be? You know, how many people have we been introduced to in this movie? It's just like, oh, it's really not that clever. So there are some elements here that I feel are too confused, and you know, they're not kind of given the breathing room to kind of like let the audience kind of take it in, or they're revealed late. So you kind of before you get there, you think, I don't know what's going on. And then there's elements here that I feel are way too obvious, and kind of like thinking that's just ridiculously obvious about what that's going to happen there. And even I gotta say, the end, I don't know if I fully was kind of satisfied with it. It just seemed like a bit of a cop-out in the end to me. So that's kind of the movie. It's an interesting movie, and I've got to say, you know, this would have been better for maybe 2 films potentially, or at least cut down the kind of the lore a little bit and have a more streamlined one movie. I think and that's what that's what a producer should do. But I really appreciate the ambition with this movie, because this film, You know, you cannot say this is a humdrum plot that is kind of, an A to B plot that you've seen a bunch of times before. It has elements of films that we have seen, but I do think there's originality here, and I applaud that. But it just needed some restraint as well. Overall, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10 because I do feel this is certainly not a bad film. So I won't give it I wouldn't flip it from an average mark to a bad mark. But I think it will be perplexing for many people. So therefore, it's going to land on the bang on average 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? Would you see it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.